Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Burning Hands Fantasy Football. We're doing a preview of, or recap slash preview of wide receivers from last year, looking at the top 16 and reviewing on what we sort of were surprised by, like, dislike, and then what's sort of their projection so far for next year. Um, all right, for some reason, I'm opening up the top guys, and for some reason, we have Tyreek Hill at number one, which definitely cannot be true.
You have it unprojected.
That would make sense. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. All right. All right, so we are going first to Cooper Cup, and he's got like a kind of a obviously big surprise. I don't think a lot of people had him going number one, but he's got an interesting outlook for next year, depending on what happens in LA. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think anything is like one. I don't buy that McVay's leaving or any of that. Like they're going to be back. They're going to go for it again. I think he'll be fantastic again. I don't think he'll do what he did this year because this is just like an outlier season. But he's still going to be great.
Do you pick him in like top three receivers?
I think as of right now, I'd put him in my top three. I've not gone through and done rankings yet, but as of right now, I think he'd be top three. I mean, you just look at the season. He only had one game that he wasn't a top 24 wide receiver. He was number one multiple times. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't see an area where he will fall so significantly that he's not in at least like a number one wide receiver. So I think he's in that Devontae Adams area where you're like, he's going to be safe.
yeah, he's got the production, and there's like worries about Woods and Odell coming back, but Woods is not going to come back right off the bat, I don't think, and then Odell's still a question mark, and I still don't think that would ruin his production. I think that Stafford has a clear favorite at this point.
Also, Odell would be like, I mean, he tore his what they ended
Oh,
up
he tore
saying.
his ACL, yeah, so he's not going to be
So
week one
even if
either.
they do re-sign him, he's going to be probably starting off the season on the pup.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like I was thinking about this earlier, like 2019, Cooper Kupp was the number 4 wide receiver.
Yeah.
Like
it's not like a new
top
thing.
Tier range is not. It's not new. It's just this was an incredible season. So I think he's pretty safe to be up there.
Yeah.
Especially being Stafford's favorite.
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting one's going to be Deebo Samuel at 2. Really got a lot of, I'm not sure really how much with rushing, but it seemed like a significant amount, at least touchdown wise. What do you think about him next year? It looks like they're going to move on from Jimmy G and go to Trey Lance. Does that have any big, I guess, change in what you're thinking with Deebo? Because for me, I don't think so. I think he had like pretty good. The 1 or 2 games that Lance played, he performed.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now, and the games that Lance had to come in, at least early in the season, was one against Seattle. He finishes number 2. Then he played against Arizona the next week. He was number 19. And then I think Lance came in later in the season, and I think that week it was against was it against Arizona the second time? I can't remember.
Yeah, not a huge.
But regardless, I think he's kind of safe because of the way that they want to use him. Like they're using him in the run game, which I think gives him a little bit. Like you don't have to worry about the QB as much. Young, unproved, like Lance to me, like next season, I will still look at him as kind of in a rookie eyeglass, like through like the rookie lens, which means that production out of the wide receivers won't be as like high, but he does have the running baseline. And he does have an injury history, which does concern me.
Yeah, I mean we'll see. It's such a small sample size. It's not really like it's hard to judge. People are like putting it all under microscope, and it's just like, you'll see whenever he gets out there. Really, you never really know. But 8 touchdowns through the running is huge. So I'm not sure I want to be drafting him top 3 or anything like that, but he'll definitely be. Looks like last year he was drafted in the 8th round, so he will be drafted higher than that. I think in most leagues, definitely. So moving on to Mr. Reliable, I guess, for fantasy. Devontae Adams was at 3 on this one. But what do you think about him? I'm assuming as long as Rodgers is there, you're keeping him high, right?
Yeah, as like if it's the same scenario as it has been like his entire career, and Rodgers is throwing him the ball at Green Bay, like he's still going to be in a top 3 wide receiver area. I don't know if that happens or not. So let's just discuss real quick, like what your thoughts are on if he goes somewhere else, or if he stays and someone else is throwing him the ball. I mean, under Rodgers this year, like 31% of the targets, like 28 red zone targets. Like,
wow. Yeah, his touchdown numbers are insane.
What do you think happens to Adams next year if Rodgers isn't there, or if he has to go somewhere else and someone else is throwing the ball?
If Rodgers isn't there, I feel like he's like fringe, like high-end wide receiver 2 for fantasy. It's hard for me to like really, like, part of me feels like he won't stay if Rodgers isn't staying. Like, why would you stay, really, and sit through this? I mean, just look at the consistency he's had. It's absurd. Since 2016, he was wide receiver 1 every single time, 7, 11, 3, and then he was 29 when he missed 4 games, and then 1, 5. Like, insane. So, like, Jordan Love, you don't want to be... I don't think you want to be here for that. But... I would probably stay away from him just because he's a question mark unless Rodgers stays. What do you think?
I kind of agree with the high-end wide receiver too. I think even if Rodgers does leave and he stays with, like, let's just say he stays with Green Bay, I think even with Love throwing in the ball, he'll still probably be wide receiver like 13, 14, 15 area. Yeah. Just because he's an incredible like athlete.
And he's the target, like the target.
Yeah.
So, whole preseason together.
I mean, and then you can't predict if he goes into free agency and where he would go and what would end up happening then. But I think regardless, he'll be a very talented receiver and probably the one on whatever team he goes to.
Yeah, a report came out that Rodgers is going to make a decision pretty soon, like in the next 2 weeks. So we'll see. He's been very hard to read. But we'll see.
I know Rodgers said he wants to have the decision out before free agency starts so that Adams can do what he wants to do.
Yeah, that would be a smart move. So now we're moving on to Justin Jefferson. There is some rumors about his quarterback potentially on the move, but pretty insane start to his career. I'm assuming we're keeping up high. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's just so talented. Even if Cousins does leave, I don't see him dropping out of like my top 12. Like young, talented, and that defense is so bad. Like he's going to be the main target and get a lot of work. But I mean, there's not much to say about Jefferson except he's going to be good for probably the next decade.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't see Jefferson falling anywhere. Some stats that I do have, he had 28.9% target share, 23 red zone targets, only 7 of those turned into touchdowns. So, I mean, a lot of room for growth in the touchdown range, but
yeah, but he's going to be up there. I don't think Cousins is probably going to go anywhere. I think that's just all rumors. But we're going to move on to his former teammate, Ja'Marr Chase. That probably falls around in the same category because he definitely has a quarterback that's sitting in Cincinnati. What do you
Yeah.
think about his outlook for next year?
I mean, I think it's the exact same as this year. Like he's going to be incredible. He is a boom bust. It does seem like he's very much a boomer bust guy, with a lot of boom.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sort
um,
of riding the Bengals regression next year, but I still think he's a top guy. But Super Bowl hangovers are real things. Teams that lose the Super Bowl generally do not do as well the next year, so I would look for that in the Bengals. So if they start to rise really high, I'm definitely going to sit and let people take them. Um,
hmm.
yeah, maybe not with T. Higgins, we'll see, but yeah, it just feels like they really overperformed this year, and it's going to be an interesting year next year in that really tough division. What do you think about that?
I think that their defense. I think that their defense is going to be the part that really takes the step back, which to me means fantasy gold. Like I don't see Burrow stepping back where he's not
Mm-hmm.
a top 12 fantasy quarterback. And if he's a top 12 fantasy quarterback, that means that you're going to get production out of at least one of your receivers. There's too much talent there on that offense for there to not be fantasy value.
Yeah,
And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like to me, like I don't look at Jamar Chase and say, "Oh, he's a top 5 wide receiver for me." I just like I don't like him there. Um, like I mean, he finished 5 this year, but I don't like. To me, there's too much variance where he could fall and be like number 12, number 11,
yeah,
because you do have T. Higgins and you have Boyd also. Uh, so I mean, I think it's hard to pick a wide receiver there, but I don't see him not being like a top 24. I see Chase probably as a top 12 and then Higgins as a top 24.
yeah. That's sort of where I'm also at, but it's just I think people are going to overvalue the Bengals because they're going to be a big Burrow MVP. They're going to come back and rule the league, and I don't think that's as easy as it sounds.
I
Uh,
don't think that they'll make it back to the Super Bowl, but I think for fantasy, they'll still be very, very valuable.
gotcha. All right, so we're hitting on number 6, which is going to be Tyreek Hill. I don't really see anything changing with this guy. He was like a lot of boom bust this year, like crazy amount, just because of the crazy fluctuation of the Kansas City Chiefs. But what do you think about him for next year?
So I'm very confused on who Tyreek Hill is going to end up being. Like, I mean, this year, boom bust. Last year was the definition of consistency. Um, and then the year before that, boom bust.
Hmm.
Um, so I thought we were over the hump, and I thought we were finally we're going to be consistent. But this year, just a lot like you playing him in the last 5 weeks of the season, like he actively hurt your team. Like weeks 13 through 17, wide receiver 63, 41, 2 against the Chargers, 86, 47.
Yeah,
Like those weeks like actively destroy your team.
yeah. He's just he was also a little bit, from what I remember, hobbled late in the year, so that may have something to do with it. But also, he's just that type of guy, and that offense was not what it was this past year. Like they got far in the playoffs, but it was very much like in that last game. You know, they looked amazing in the first half, and then they didn't do squat in the second half. So
Mhm.
it's sort of this. There are reports of Bieniemy potentially not coming back, and we'll see about that. But I still think he's a wide receiver 1, and I don't think there's too much of a concern if he falls to you with good value. You take him. I just wouldn't overreach too much, but I can't really see it. You know, he's still a producer. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Um,
He's still a guy who can go out there and win you a week in one half of football.
yeah, and now we're sort of there's a couple guys we'll get to soon that are a lot like this boom bust type deal. So Stephon Diggs came off of, I think last year he was absurd and he had a slight regression, but he's pretty much still one of the top guys. And Josh Allen's coming back, of course. What do you think about him for next year?
Um, I mean, I think a lot of people who drafted him were really upset with him because they were expecting the wide receiver one.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, beyond that, like he did still have a really solid season all around. I mean, you can't be upset with wide receiver 7. And just like looking at his stats, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns. Maybe he didn't really deliver on the amount of touchdowns you wanted. But I mean, for the most part, top 24 wide receiver, slow start to the year, which I think hurt a lot of people, like 39, 23, 40. 19 and 43 were his rankings first 5 weeks of the season. So I think that really messed with people.
Yeah, I think that ruined his reputation a little bit because people were expecting a big start, and then he really just got on in the middle of the year. Consistently.
Which I think, because even at the end of the season, he slowed down a week, like last couple of weeks of the season, 39, 38. He had a 43 finish in championship week. I actually really like Diggs in next year for redraft because I think a lot of people for fantasy, they remember the first half of like the first 4 games and like the playoffs.
Yeah, just the regression. I think people will be like, not so much. So he might be a little bit undervalued this upcoming year, and unless they draft or like bring in some receiver, they don't really have like. I mean, they have what was the guy Gabriel? They got the 4 touchdowns, so they'll have him.
Yeah, they have
maybe
Gabriel
he'll make
Davis.
a step up.
And I mean, he's shown flashes here and there, and I'm not sure if he'll end up. I don't think he'll become like an elite receiver, but a solid number 2.
Yeah. But I still think, I don't think Diggs is going anywhere really at this point. He's still young and good player.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're moving on to Mike Evans, which is going to be an interesting. We'll see what Tampa Bay does, but what do you think about a guy that has a lot of boom bust potential and might have a new quarterback next year?
I am very upset that I had to get rid of him in the Dynasty League. I still love Mike Evans. I mean, to me, Mike Evans, if he retired right now, would be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Like, you don't think of him that way, but I mean, he's just never had a season under 1,000 yards, which is incredible. Like, this is year 8 seasons of 1,000 yards every single year.
Yeah, and that's a record.
The past 5 seasons, he's been a wide receiver 1. I think people kind of have fatigue from him, so I think you might find some value in Evans. But that team is losing. It does lose Brady, which is going to hurt, but I just don't see Evans not finishing with 1,000 yards. I think they'll find someone to bring him in, and Evans will be the guy. Because Godwin is a free agent, and I personally I've seen a lot of people think that the Bucs are going to bring back Godwin. I'm not sure if they do. They already tagged him last year, so I don't see and I just don't see him coming to an agreement on a long-term deal for him.
I don't think they know what they're doing with him.
Yeah. But you're losing a ton of targets from Fournette. You're losing Jones. You're losing targets from Brown. You're losing, I guess Gronk is still there, but I'm not sure if he will be.
I think he's gone. I'm not sure if he actually officially retired, but I'm pretty sure he's gone.
I don't think he's officially retired. I don't think he's said that he's gone yet, but I think he will be. So then if that happens and you have targets that would have been going to Gronk, you have Godwin's targets. If he leaves, you have O.J. Howard, who's a free agent, who, I know he's not a big name, but he also had targets, and so did Cameron Brate, who's also gone. That team has a ton of targets available for next year, and I think Evans will continue to be a top 12 wide receiver, as much as people are tired of him.
Yeah, my concern is who's throwing the football. Arians the other day gave support to Blaine Gabbert, which would be pretty bad. But I still think Evans will get his. I'm not too worried. I think he'll drop a little bit, but I think he's that low-end wide receiver 1 unless he gets some stud quarterback, or at least a mediocre quarterback. Okay, now we have a surprise here at this high. I did not know Deontay Johnson was this high.
Hey, consistency.
Yeah, consistency and a lot of receptions.
Yeah.
So what do you think going forward with him? I mean, we still don't know. It looks like, at least right now, it's Mason Rudolph. But what do you think about Deontay Johnson for next year?
I mean, Big Ben was not good this past season.
Yeah.
Granted, he was still better than Mason Rudolph and Haskins. So I don't have like I don't see them going out unless they go out and somehow bring in Wilson or Rodgers, which I don't see happening. I think he'll probably actually end up finishing probably about where he's at if they go out and draft. If they go out and bring in Teddy Bridgewater or some average quarterback, I think he'll be about where he's at. But something to keep in mind is a lot of people are putting a rookie quarterback in Pittsburgh next year. And I just heard this stat earlier today. Since 2004, rookie quarterbacks have produced a top 36 wide receiver 30% of the time. So the other 70%, they don't even get a wide receiver in the top 36.
That's not good.
So for teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks this year in the draft, which you're looking at, the Steelers could be drafting someone. The Panthers could be drafting someone. The Commanders could be drafting someone. All of those teams are looking at they have talented receivers. You have Deontay Johnson, you have Chase Claypool, you have DJ Moore, who's been a top 24 every year basically. You have Terry McLaurin. So a lot of wide receivers that you could really see drop out. I mean, look at Allen Robinson this year. People thought that he would still be successful, even with the rookie quarterback, because he's had bad quarterbacks, but rookie quarterbacks just don't produce.
Yeah, the one thing that, the silver lining with Deontay Johnson, he's just such a short possession receiver. A lot of times he can just get those catches in. I do like him sort of as a higher end wide receiver too, so a little bit of a slip, but he's just one of those guys. Juju's not going to be back. It's just going to be him and Claypool, and they don't really feel like they don't fight for the same type of routes.
Targets.
Yeah. So I'm still okay with him, but I mean, we'll see where it goes. I think he's going to be around the same place he was last year in terms of getting drafted, which is going to be the third or fourth, and we'll see what quarterback goes in and what's the feel, I guess, a little bit. But yeah, he's one of the bigger question marks definitely going into next year. Yeah. So you have anything else you want to go with Deontay? But a lot of question marks.
No, I just think, yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. A lot of question marks on who the quarterback is, but if he has someone stable, I think he'll continue to produce. But if he has a rookie or one of the guys that's on the rosters currently, it could be ugly for him next year.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going into another question mark, who is Mike Williams, who I believe is a free agent.
Free agent.
So I'm assuming the Chargers are going to try to bring him back after this great year he had. But I think let's just assume he's with the Chargers and then assume if he leaves after that. But I still think he's overperformed this year a little bit. I'm not sure you're going to get the same consistency. He played all 16 games, which I'm actually looking. He has not been as injured as I remember him being always injured. But
oh wow. No, I don't remember him not being that injured.
Yeah. And just the fact that Keenan Allen was outperformed by him is surprising to me. But I think he's in that wide receiver 2 range. I'm not sure high end 1 or low end 1. But he's just such a boom bust guy. It's not really the same as a normal wide receiver 1. What do you think about him for next year?
I personally, if he's on the Chargers again, I think you'll have the same scenario that you had this year, where you're going to have weeks where he goes out and puts up 112 and 2 and is the number one wide receiver on the week. And I think he'll have those weeks, but you're also going to have a lot of the boom bust. So I think he's a great wide receiver too, in terms of like you can just throw him in your lineup and he could go off and win you the week. But I personally don't think that he'll be back with the Chargers next year.
Interesting.
I think that you're looking at a team that they just drafted a wide receiver in the 3rd round last year in Joshua Palmer. They have Keenan Allen. They have a young tight end group that's going to be playing, I think, Jake Parham. So I think they're going to let Williams go because, I mean, you look at the free agency class for wide receivers this year. He's kind of like that second tier of wide receiver behind, like, obviously your Devontae Adams and Chris Godwin. But, like, beyond that, like, I would put Mike Williams right up there in terms of receiver talent this year. And I don't – like, he's coming into free agency in a good year for wide receivers.
Yeah, and also it's a lot of money to spend for one guy that's had one really good season and all the rest were pretty mediocre. So, I mean, we'll see. But I still think, he's in that. I wouldn't want him as my wide receiver 1, but he's a great wide receiver 2 type deal. So we'll see where he sort of falls in terms of drafting. But I think we're on the same page with that. I'm going to skip Patterson because we did him as a running back.
I agree with that.
And then we can just double up on Lockett and Metcalf because they're our same team and they just fight each other for targets. What do you think about each of them, and who sort of are you leaning towards a little bit, or generally who do you lean towards? Because it's always a debate which Seahawk receiver wins people's hearts.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that either one of these guys you're fine to have, but it's the same scenario as Mike Williams. Like, I don't want either one as my wide receiver 1. They're just not consistent enough. I think I think they're both, to be honest, the exact same. Which you can kind of see in their final score at the end of their points at the end of the season. They're both gonna win you weeks and they're both gonna lose you weeks. So to me, I'm taking Lockett every time because he's gonna be like 2 rounds after Metcalf because people love Metcalf.
That's sort of the strategy, and Metcalf's definitely like the more flashy and like big name type guy, and he's the potential because he's younger. And also he had like there was some discontent, it seemed, with Metcalf throughout the year. He had like a very horrible slump once Russell Wilson came back, and really the whole team did not figure itself out until like 5 weeks into Russell Wilson coming back. It's sort of a weird vibe in Seattle. We thought that either Wilson or Carroll would be gone. It seems like they're both. We're not hearing anything, so it's really strange out there. It's not really a team that I'm like looking forward into evaluating what they're going to be like next year. It's take one as a wide receiver 2, and then I would not be banking on Metcalf getting wide receiver 1 numbers. I mean, maybe he does. He did it once before, but I wouldn't bet on it in Seattle. All right, anything else you want to touch on in Seattle?
Nope. I think just personally, wide receiver 2s, Metcalf will probably be taken as a wide receiver 1 in redraft leagues, and you can be happy to not have him as your wide receiver 1 and grab Lockett in the 5th or 6th.
Yeah. All right, now we're going to a guy that was teammates with the guy we just talked about, and that's Keenan Allen, who was with Mike Williams, and had a little bit of a slump here, I feel like, for him. I mean, it was sort of on par for what he usually is, but I guess there were higher expectations with the new Herbert as quarterback.
I think there was a bit of a letdown because people were so excited about Herbert, but I mean, pretty on par season for him.
Yeah. And that's, very low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2, and I don't really expect that much of a difference. He feels like he's been here forever, but he's only 29, so he still should have like a couple years at least for a
Yeah.
receiver. What do you think about him for next year?
I mean, this is like Keenan Allen's the type of receiver that I would be like content with my wide receiver one, even though he doesn't always finish in that one range. But I mean, you're looking at a guy who typically had like almost every single year has 6 touchdowns, um, basically consistently. Occasional 8, occasional 4, but mostly 6. Like finishes over the last few seasons are 14, 14, 8, 12, 3. Like he's going to be consistent throughout the season as well. Only really hurt you like 3 times this season.
Yeah.
So
He's so consistent generally, which is like just really nice. It gives me another push because I don't really like that much of boom bust players. And hey, if Mike Williams leaves, he's even higher. I think like he's a guy to shoot for potentially if Mike Williams is gone because other people could step up there, but he's the lone vet really on that team outside of Eckler.
I mean, I think even if Williams leaves, I think it's kind of the same thing that where you were talking about with Claypool and Deontay. Like they don't really compete for the same targets.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really. I think Joshua Palmer would probably be the guy that would step in the Mike Williams role, and then Keenan Allen would just keep doing what he does, which is getting double-digit targets and just a ton of receptions and yards.
It's a good point, definitely. All right, now we're moving on. I think this is number 16 here at Renfro, which was a surprise. So I think we're going to cap it at Renfro. You cool with that?
Yeah, sure, that works for me.
Cool. I'm not. They don't have numbers on this, so I'm trying to count. You go. You count, and I'll open up with Renfro.
Sounds good.
All right, so we got Hunter Renfro, a guy that pretty much was almost like a fringe roster guy the past 2 years. Didn't really seem like very much. Was sort of like a guy you picked on waivers midway through the year, and he really like just came on probably halfway through the year. He started off strong, but it seemed like Waller was like the guy for the Raiders, and like he was getting all the targets, and they were talking about Bryan Edwards and different guys, but Renfro really became the guy, especially once Gruden left, and just sort of been like the favorite possession target, almost like Julian Edelman. And the new coach in Las Vegas is from the Patriots, loves these kind of types of receivers. So what do you think about Renfro next year?
I think he's going to be like the weapon for the new Edelman for him. I think he's just going to receive a bunch of targets over the middle. Like I don't think he's going to come out and amaze anyone with like a top 12 wide receiver next year, but I think you're looking at someone who people aren't going to really remember what he did this year, and he'll probably fall back into like round 7 or 8 and you can grab him, and he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver for your team.
I'm a little bit higher on him. I think he's like a top end wide receiver too. I think like this could be a like, I'm not gonna say Cooper Kupp level, but like a pretty big up with just McDaniels, and that unless they, really pack up that wide receiver core, which I don't really see happening. It did help Waller being hurt a little bit for Renfro, but I think he's gonna maintain this like mid to high tier wide receiver too. Definitely not wide receiver 1 yet. I wouldn't bank on that, but I don't think anyone's gonna be drafting him that high anyway. So I think he's like worth the little risk here, unless they
I think he'll outperform his ADP next year. Like I think he's a pretty safe guy in that bet.
That's the idea. I feel like I think he's like a guy that you'll be surprised by, or at least like, hey, this was not a bad pick. I don't see him disappointing that much, really. Anything else you want to talk about for Renfro?
Nope, I'm good. I did do a count. CeeDee Lamb will be number 16.
Okay, so we got 2 more. We got Michael Pittman on the Colts, and there's trouble in Indianapolis with reports of Wentz potentially being gone, but we'll see if that's for real. What do you think about for Michael Pittman next year? give or take Wentz being there. I'm not really sure what's going to happen.
So I mean, in terms of like a second year wide receiver, this was a fantastic year to come out. Um, like he really didn't have the touchdowns. Like this was like all yards and receptions, like 6 touchdowns on the year. But I mean, you look at his targets in the middle stretch of the year where he was really going off, just consistent targets. And I think he's going to be good next year. The question is who's the quarterback going to be? If it's Wentz again, I think he'll probably finish probably about where he's at this year. I don't see him making another leap forward with Wentz there. And I also don't really see him going out and grabbing anyone that would make me put him in the elite category of being a top 12 wide receiver. I think he has the talent to be up there, but I don't know who you get a quarterback that would put Pittman up there.
Yeah, I mean, you could get one of the top 2 guys, and Wilson or Rodgers, but I don't really see that happening. I think there was a big mistake. Someone in the Colts organization leaked that report, and that was a huge, huge, huge mistake because just playing your hand and like opening up like that just puts him in a bad position. I don't think Wentz coming back another year is the worst thing ever. Just because there's nothing. What are you doing if it's not like it's Winston is the next top free agent? That's not you don't have to trade for. You could trade for Cousins maybe. I think Cousins would give him a bit of a boost. Not by like a ton, but I think you'd be looking at.
If Cousins went there, I would put Pittman in the top 12.
Yeah, I'd put him on that bottom end of the wide receiver 1. But I think right now he's where he probably should be. He's somewhere in that wide receiver 2 range. There's hope that he could outperform, but it's really going to come down to who's playing at quarterback. I think if Wentz is still there is potential that he'll hit 12, but I don't think he's going to go anything crazy or higher like that.
With the Colts just being such a run, like their identity being the run game, it's hard for there to be that elite wide receiver there.
Yeah, and his production was really early season, first half of the season, first 10 weeks, and then once the Taylor train started happening, there's a little bit less production on his end. He was still getting pretty much the same amount of targets, but a little bit less production. But yeah, things are looking good. He's a good receiver. He's got a bright future. So now we're going to go to the Dallas Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb and his counterpart Amari Cooper's on the trade block. From what it seems, there are reports I've seen like every day of of proposals to trade for Cooper. I saw one to the Jaguars. I think last night. Would have been a not too good trade. But what do you think about CeeDee Lamb? I mean, he's young. He's performing pretty much around a slow progression. Do you think he still makes a jump, or he's still around this like high end mid wide receiver 2?
I think that CeeDee still has the chance to jump into that elite category of being in the Devontae Adams talks and the Cooper Kupps and that top 3 wide receiver. It's not this upcoming season. But I mean, like, I don't think people are going to be talking about him being in that top, like, 5 area. But I think even in this upcoming season, I think there's a chance that he finishes as a top 12, top 6 wide receiver. Because, I mean, if Amari Cooper leaves, like, that opens up the targets even more. But regardless, Michael Gallup is gone this year. We talked about it during the running back show where that defense was the number 1 scoring defense on the year, and that's not something that gets repeated, which means that they're going to put up more offensive points next year because they're going to have to.
Yeah, they're going to get more time with the ball.
Yeah. Like this year, like the Cowboys finished number 1 in points per game as a team, but they also finished number 1 in defensive scoring. So, like, I think you're going to see the offense really have to put more out there. And I think you're going to have another year with Dak being back from his injury and healthy. Because, I mean, he came into the season coming off that ankle injury, then he hurt his arm. Just a lot of problems at the QB position with injury. you get a healthy season from Dak, I think you're going to see CD have a even better season than he did this year, and just continue to move up.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that probably like maybe reach a little bit for, especially if Cooper's gone. I just can see he's so talented, and it seems like he kind of is a little bit more consistent than Cooper. So that sort of makes me steer that way. And I feel like there's a little bit less pressure going into next year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a ton of pressure and like ton of talk this year about the Cowboys. Um, and now that they won the division, they didn't do amazing in the playoffs or anything like that, but I think like at least they're back. Hey, we're relevant. Hey, we can do this. Blah blah blah. That sort of feeling, and it doesn't look like the NFC East is really battling them. And they're going to get more touches, just like you said, but the defense not going to be able to score as much and create the amount of turnovers and short fields for them. So they're going to have to get more yardage, more points. So that bodes well for pretty much everyone on the Cowboys. And I think CeeDee Lamb is the favorite target of Dak at this point.
Yeah. I think he's definitely the most talented.
Yeah, definitely the most talented and most upside. So year 3 should be sort of up. Let's see if we can get up to wide receiver 1 with him. And I think that's a good risk to take if you're drafting, if he's not jumping up draft boards. But it's always weird with, Cowboys people, depending on your league and if there's any Cowboys fans. But all right, we got through the first 16. We're going to be going on to the next 16, which I think is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more variation. But it's a good start to long off season. Lots of boring TV sports until March Madness. All right, man. You got anything else you want to bring up?
Free agency is right around the corner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But we'll see. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.